Did you know that your brain continues to develop into your late 40s? According to Professor Sarah Jane Blakemore, a neuroscientist at the University of London, says that it does. In this speech, you will learn about several parts of the brain and how they function. The brain is one of the most complex things about our bodies. I have done extensive research to tell you all about how our brains work. I will be going over the four main lobes of the brain and telling you their functions. To start off, let's talk about the frontal lobe. The main function of the frontal lobe is for movement, decision-making, problem-solving, and planning. The frontal lobe is located behind the forehead. Without your frontal lobe, you would not be able to think properly. You probably don't realize it, but you use your frontal lobe every day for most of the day. The frontal lobe is also what helps form your personality. A man by the name of Phineas Gage had an accident while working on a railroad in Vermont. An iron pole had went through the frontal lobe region of his brain. According to the news article that I read, he was able to stand up and talk right after it happened. Dr. Harlow is the doctor that took over the case after it first happened. Harlow was able to examine him and see how the injury changed the way Gage processed his thinking. Friends said that before the injury he was a hard-working, pleasant man. But after the accident, he was lazy and an aggressive drunkard who couldn't hold a job. The frontal lobe is an important role in functioning in your everyday life. The next lobe of the brain I will discuss is the parietal lobe. The main function of the parietal lobe is to process sensory information from all over the body and sensation and perception. A common injury to the parietal lobe is having a stroke in the region of the brain. According to Jose Vega, who is a doctor, he said that even the most mild stroke can do great damage to that part of your brain. Some things that will change are to visually scan the surroundings despite having a full range of eye movement. Another is the spatial perception, in which a person has difficulty measuring depth, length, and the size of objects. Another symptom you could develop is not being able to identify an object without using other senses such as touch, smell, hearing, and looking to identify an object. Without your parietal lobe, you would have a hard time being able to process sensory information and perception, the sensations, but with the occipital lobe, you are able to see. The third lobe of the brain is the occipital lobe. The occipital lobe is to process the visual stimuli and information received from the eyes. Your occipital lobe is to interpret what your eyes are seeing. If this part of your brain is impaired, then you would not be able to correctly process visual signals. Disorders in the visual lobe can cause hallucinations and illusions. Visual illusions can take form of objects appearing smaller or larger than they actually are, objects lacking color or abnormal coloring. Just like the occipital lobe is to process things you see, the temporal lobe is to process and analyze the things you hear. The last lobe I would like to inform you about is the temporal lobe. Not only does the temporal lobe play a role in auditory information, but it also plays a role in memory, personality, and behavior. If you were to damage the temporal lobe, you would not be able to hear anything, since that is the main function of the lobe. If you were to have seizures in the temporal lobe area, it could cause effects on the individual's personality. Some people say they have selective hearing, and they aren't wrong. Some people choose to listen to what they want to hear. The four main lobes of the brain are the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and temporal lobe. The brain is one of the most complex organs about our bodies. These lobes of the brain are what make you you. Everyone's brain can work differently, and that is why everyone acts differently and thinks the way that they do.